I learned, and I think he learned as well. You know, one of the funny jokes somebody told me was they said in Washington, if you want to keep a secret between 3 people, 2 of them have to be dead, right? And so, you know, but it wasn't quite that bad. I think it was a function of, in the beginning, I felt very, very helpless, right? Like I said, I think something and like it would lead to the Washington Post. It was so bad.
Yeah.
And I think with him too. So a couple of things, I read about how I adjusted and said, okay, the game is the game. It's been here long before me. It's going to be here long after me. You know, you have a chance to be in the game. If you are in the game, you can get good things done, but you have to get better at the game.
So then the campaign's starting, and I've talked to Don Jr. about this publicly on this show and privately. Like, he was telling me how so many people that were lifelong friends of his suddenly deserted him and just all of that nonsense. So now you and Ivanka are intimately involved in this thing, and then he wins. Now you're going to D.C. I mean, first off, did you have just a whole bunch of friends that shed you immediately? And how insane was just getting to D.C. and then seeing what that was like?
So believe it or not, we didn't. And I think that what happened was I think through my father's experience, I was very selective in who I let in. So Ivanka and I have a very close relationship, and a lot of our time in New York was spent just the 2 of us, right? If we had to choose between going to a dinner party or being with us, we would be with us. And we would always love doing different adventures, going on dates, you know, trying new restaurants, seeing new neighborhoods. And then as we started building a family, that was a priority for us as well. And we'd had a ton of acquaintances, you know, from New York, but the people who were our real friends were people who we thought were very quality people who we got things out of, and I think who got things out of us. And those people were all people mostly on the left of the political spectrum. Again, I had probably like one conservative friend that I could think of from before this experience. But everyone was very respectful and very, very open of what we were doing, and recognized that, again, it wasn't Ivanka and I who were, you know, giving speeches or making policies. It was her father, and you know, she was doing what a devoted daughter would do. But for me, I was much more open-minded and much more studying the policies. I think for Ivanka, she basically said, okay, if this is the situation that's happening, she had a mission-driven business at the time where there were issues she was advocating for. She said, well, if I can use this as a platform to elevate the issues she cared about, like paid family leave and childcare, she says, well, then I think it's kind of irresponsible not to do that. So she gave a speech at the RNC introducing her father, and all the things on the internet after were saying was, did she think she was at the Democratic convention? Because they were not traditionally Republican policies. And
that her dad used to be loved by the Democrats. I mean, there's no shortage of pictures with all those people when they used to love him, and he was donating to some of them.
Yeah, being in New York, and again, he was part of pop culture and all this. So yeah, but the short answer is that, you know, our friends were really strong and really still are. And what I found is that when we decided to go to Washington, and I write about kind of how we made that decision, because it wasn't like we were thinking, okay, he's going to win and then this is going to happen, right? The whole campaign was like, let's get to goal line plus an inch. Like, you know, who the hell knows how this is going to work out?
But you do talk about that. You kind of thought it was going to happen the whole time, right?
I didn't. Again, logically, it felt like he should be able to do it, right? All the math, and I can go into a whole thing on polling, but from what I saw, it was like the polling all seemed like it was not scientific, right? So if you look at all the public polling that predicted he was going to lose, I was shocked by how many people just followed it. But polling is basically, you call 500 people and they say yes or no, and then you have to do something called a weighting, right? And weighting is basically you say, okay, if we called, you know, 100 Democrats and 100 Republicans, how many people do you think are going to vote? And then you kind of recalculate the results in order to do that. So what happened in Brexit right before Trump won was the polling was off massively. Now, it predicted the amount of people who said stay pretty accurately, but it was off by about 3 million votes for the people who predicted to leave. And as I researched why that was, I was reading all the info on it. It basically said that they just undercounted low propensity voters. And so with Trump, all of the media was using basically the Obama-Romney turnout model. And I was like, I don't think that's indicative, right? Like Obama had a different electricity that Hillary didn't have. And Trump had a different electricity that Romney didn't have. So it felt like it should be different. And then when I look at, we built a data file, about 10 million people were showing up at Trump rallies, and a big percentage of them were low propensity voters. And so we basically, every time we do a sample, which we re-engineered the polling, we basically ran it through 2 different models. One was like the media model, which showed we were going to lose, and one was our model, which showed we were going to win. And so I just, again, you know, Romney went into election night thinking they were going to win if I was told, and then were disappointed. So I never allowed myself to believe our data because I'd never done it before. And so, but that was what I believed was more logical as an outcome, but we didn't think about what would come next. Sorry, it's such a long thing.
So speaking of what came next, so now you get there, now you're working for the president, and the media's not that happy, CNN, New York Times, okay, all that stuff. But you guys actually were accomplishing an awful lot pretty much from the get-go, considering you had nobody willing to work with you.
Yeah, so it was a wild thing. And the first year, in writing the book, I went through the first year, and it brought back a lot of memories that actually were really painful for me. Because we get to Washington, so we make the decision to, and it wasn't like, oh, should we stay in New York and live our lives, or should we go to Washington? It was like, okay, he is now going to be the president of the United States. Our former lives as we knew it don't exist anymore, right? So, and then you say you have an opportunity to serve in government and try to make an impact. And I built more confidence based on the fact that in the campaign I was able to achieve certain successes and things that experienced political people told me was the wrong way to do it, but then I did it that way and it ended up working. And so I said, well, let's give it a shot and let's try to help him. And again, he'd never been a mayor, never been a governor, so he was running a family business. He was used to working with family. His campaign was a family campaign. And so we said, let's go give it a shot and really try to see if we could help him implement the policies that we believe in and try to do things that we believe are good. So Ivanka gave up her business to then focus on her mission. I went in. And we had no idea what a brutal world Washington was going to be. And so whether it was like the attacks from the media, whether it was the investigation, I mean, within 3 months, I have, people leaking on me like crazy from inside the White House. You talk to yourself and it would be in the Washington Post.
Wait, can you just talk about a little bit more about what that's like, the leak situation? Like, how is it possible? Because everyone's always talking about the leaks. They were talking about it an awful lot with Trump, but it happens in every administration. Like, did you feel like, oh, here's 10 people in this room in this meeting, like 6 of them might be the one, or like, how do you manage some of that stuff as an advisor? Or do you pull him aside and say, hey, Mr. President, maybe don't, or dad-in-law, or whatever you call him, Don, do you maybe don't say everything you think off the cuff in front of everybody because we have this problem? Like,
so I think I learned, and I think he learned as well. One of the funny jokes somebody told me was they said in Washington, if you want to keep a secret between 3 people, 2 of them have to be dead, right? And so, but it wasn't quite that bad. I think it was a function of, in the beginning, I felt very, very helpless, right? Like I said, I think something and like it would leak to the Washington Post. It was so bad. Yeah. And I think with him too. So a couple of things, I read about how I adjusted and said, okay, the game is the game. It's been here long before me. It's going to be here long after me. You have a chance to be in the game. If you are in the game, you can get good things done, but you have to get better at the game. And so certain things, like when I would give my opinion to Donald, especially when I would disagree with him, I would always do it one-on-one. I would never say my opinion in front of other people, or I would say something that I didn't think would be salacious. But when I wanted to strongly disagree, I would always do it privately because you never wanted to read about that in the press, because that would, I never wanted division to show between us, because he always gave me the opportunity to voice my opinion, and sometimes he would listen, sometimes he wouldn't. Again, I was an advisor. And some things, quite frankly, I had more conviction on, some things I had less conviction on. And often when he would ask me, I'd say, look, I'm not an expert on it. Let me find somebody who I think is and bring them in to give you that point of view. But so that was probably number one. And then when it came to just dealing with people, you learned very quickly like who was leaking to which places. And we just had so many of them who were scumbags who were doing that.
But were they all your guys? You know what I mean? Or were they like sort of deep state people that were all there all the time? Or were there a lot of them?
Were the people coming in? Look, we didn't have a lot of people, right? And the campaign was ragtag. We had to staff up quickly. We were making a lot of decisions, putting different people together. And you just have people. And then, the more people get insecure, the more it's an environment that kind of encourages more of it. So it's a very, very complicated situation to work in. But like I said, I figured out how to adjust. I got tighter. And then ultimately over time, like towards the end, we announced a peace deal, which we'll talk about later, but and nobody knows about it, right? So I learned how to find the people who you could work with to keep things quiet. But it just took me some time. And like when you work in, real estate or technology, like nobody's out there leaking to the press, and everyone's aligned for the same mission too. So it's just a different game, and you just have to learn to adjust to the game.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop yelling, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.